Wallace Fowler, Mrs. Margaret Baggio, and all the SEAS internships.
Our favorite part of this experience was getting to collaborate with a team of unique and brilliant individuals who all share a common passion. We are grateful to have had this experience as a stepping stone on our path to our futures and ultimately our paths to changing the world. Thank you. Any questions?
Is there anything in the box? Oh, no. There's nothing in this box. It's just it gives an example of size of how small it is. It's full size. And this one's 1/3 scale. Yeah, but it's very small space.
We have a question.
Yes. Can you say just a little bit more about your crowd generator, how that code generator works?
What do you mean? So the cryo cooler system. So now the Biosentinel spacecraft comes with its own cryo cooling system that can cool the temperature of the spacecraft maintain the temperature between 0 and 50 degrees Celsius. But for our sensors, we needed to have an additional cryo cooling system to prevent any interference as the molecules move around just by their thermal energy. And so our cryo cooling system comes with Birch's instrument. And so it's no additional weight. It's attached to the instrument itself. But it's specially designed in order to cool the instrument to sub-zero temperatures to prevent any interference.
Okay, so you're just buying this and sitting at work.
Yes.
Yes. Those CubeSats advance their database and you just print spreads that are already existing and customize the CubeSats to what you want.
Any other questions?
We got conference right here.
Please join me for thanking the Aerospace. May I have your attention, please? Our next group is the Emergency Preparedness Group.
Hello, we are the Magic Emergency Preparedness Group, and I am Kayla Boyhart from Los Gatos, California.
I'm Ellen Casrazas from Houston, Texas. I'm Ann Weil from Williston, North Dakota.
And I'm Sue Monsanti, and I'm from Delray Beach, Florida.
Okay, so to begin, what is emergency preparedness? Emergency preparedness is ensuring the safety of you and others before, during, and after an emergency. And the MAGIC in emergency preparedness stands for Mid-American Geospatial Information Center. So for our project, we focused on Hurricane Harvey. We chose this because most of us are familiar with Hurricane Harvey because of how recently this event took place. Actually, one of our team members, Ellen, her house was flooded, so maybe she's a little more familiar than the rest of us, but So for our project, we compared data sets from NASA's satellites and from the National Weather Service. We compiled this data into a map to create a median between the two data sets. Our goal was to test the hypothesis that NASA's satellite data tends to overestimate light rainfall and underestimate heavy rainfall. This is important for emergency responders to know, so they know which places need the most attention. And a little bit about Hurricane Harvey. It formed August 17th, 2017, and dissipated September 2nd, 2017. And we chose to study the hurricane from August 23rd through the 31st using Giovanni. So the two data sets we used were NASA's IMER data from a website called Giovanni, and IMER stands for Integrated Multi-Satellite Retrievals for GPM. We retrieved the IMER data sets through NASA's Giovanni tool, which I already mentioned. IMER collects multiple data sets. We compared daily precipitation data from the ground, AHPS, to daily precipitation from IMER data. So before we came here, we had kind of a precursor to our project. There's this remote sensing training on NASA's website that we use to prepare ourselves and to have the ability to analyze severe weather and precipitation. RSAT stands for Applied Remote Sensing Training. And remote sensing is measurement of a quantity associated with an object such as rainfall, landslides, or hurricanes in our case. And we focused on applications of remote sensing observation for disaster management. So QGIS is the application we use to compile all of our data. We used it as a viewer and for analysis. We used version 2.8 Las Palmas. This application helped us see the differences between the two data sets. And,
So to generate our map projections on QGIS, we had to use the coordinate reference system. And this coordinate reference system came from the European Petroleum Survey Group, or EPSG. This was a collection of definitions for coordinate reference systems that we would be using when creating our map projections. We wanted to create a coordinate reference system that was EPSG compliant for our AHAPS data. So to do this, we created a custom coordinate reference system and enabled on-the-fly coordinate referencing to compare the data sets we would be working with. We ended up calling our custom coordinate reference system NWS for the National Weather Service AHAPS coordinate system. And before we were given our task, we were given the parameters to input into our custom coordinate reference system. And as you can see, they're up there. So with this, we inputted those parameters and created the custom coordinate reference system. And once this coordinate reference system was created, it was in the definitions list for all of our future QGIS projects, so we had to work with. And we did end up using this coordinate reference system for all of our AHAPS data, which comes from the ground radars, but we ended up needing a common coordinate reference system when working with our IMER NASA data. So we ended up using the World Geodetic System for the geographic coordinates, also known as Pseudo-Mercator EPSG 3857. It is the standard definition of a global reference system for geospatial information. So we ended up using this projection to flatten out the display of the continental US map when looking at our data. So here are some of the different projections that we ended up working with on QGIS. So this is the coordinate reference system 4326. And as you can see, it's a little bit wide and flat and distorted. So with this, we changed to the 3857, which is more of how we wanted to display our data with the wide view and the flat projection. And you can see that the custom coordinate reference system we created was rounded out. So we ended up sticking to the common ground 3857 projection. This projection was common ground, whereas the custom COS was for AHAB's data.
So as opposed to the temporary projection on the fly that Sulan mentioned, we also permanently change the maps by reshaping the pixels to be projected into different coordinate systems. So in this picture, you can see pre-warp and post-warp. So warping is just another term for reprojecting these things into different coordinate systems. So pre-warp, it looks a lot more pixelated, and post-warp, after reshaping the pixels, it just looks generally smoother. So in pre-warp, this is for our custom coordinate system that you mentioned. In post-warp, this is EPSG 3857, also known as pseudo-Mercator. So the point of projecting these maps into common coordinate systems is to have a direct comparison, so we can compare pixel by pixel and generally just have better similarity differences. So all of the data we use came to us in numerical form. So we basically had a bunch of numbers and we had to figure out how to interpret them. Our project was to display this numerical data as colors on a map so people could easily interpret levels of daily precipitation by looking at the map. So symbology is the thing that tells you how to interpret data. So our symbology tells us how to interpret certain numbers as certain colors, as you can see above. At the beginning of our project, our mentor gave us a text file that contained the symbology for converting inches into millimeters. And so our data came from two sources, NW, the National Weather Service's AHABS data and NASA's IMERT data. And while the National Weather Service's AHABS data did come to us in inches and we could easily use the given text file to convert them, NASA's IMERT data came in millimeters. So we had to create a new text file and convert the millimeters, the inches into millimeters, and then be able to apply this text file to all of our data that came to us in millimeters.
So as my teammates mentioned, we used systems such as coordinate systems, warping, and symbology to interpret the precipitation data more easily. And one of the data sets that we have used was called Giovanni-Eimer data, which Mary had touched on a little bit earlier. So Giovanni-Eimer data is obtained from NASA's Giovanni web tool. And when you first upload Eimer into the QGIS program, it can, as you can see on the screen here, the raw data is shown in a single color band. But we want to be able to change this render type into a single band pseudo color. So I put together an animation for Hurricane Harvey from August 23rd to 31st, 2017. And as you can see around here, the tropical storm is starting to collect a little bit in the Gulf of Mexico. The 24th, it is considered to be a hurricane. And on the 25th, it actually hits Texas here. And you can see it with the key on the right of the precipitation data. The precipitation is starting to gather a little bit more. And on the 26th, it stalls over Texas and more precipitation is starting to accumulate. And from the 27th through the 31st, you can see that it moves more eastward over East Texas and Louisiana. And the other data set that we had used is called AHABS data and is obtained by the National Weather Service. And AHABS stands for Advanced Hydrologic Prediction Services. And when you upload AHABS data into the QGIS program, it actually comes in 4 color bands, but we still only want the single band pseudo color, so we again have to change the render type. And this animation is the same animation essentially for Hurricane Harvey, except using AHABS data instead of IMERT data. So I'll go through this one a little bit faster. But as you can see, on the 23rd, it is starting to collect in the Gulf of Mexico. The 24th, it is categorized as a hurricane. The 25th, it hits Texas and is a category 4 hurricane. And on the 26th, it stalls over Texas. And again, from the 27th through the 31st, it moves more eastward. And since I just showed you 2 different animations that look really similar to each other, here's a side-by-side example of the difference between IMERT and AHABS data. So on the left is IMERT data, and on the right is the AHABS data. And this data is for the same exact day, August 23rd, 2017. And if you look closely, they look very different. And another difference between the two is that the pixel size for IMERG data, which is on the left, is 15,000 meters, whereas the pixel size for AHAPS data is only 5,000 meters. This means that AHAPS data is more detailed because it zooms in more for each pixel. So as well as studying the general trends of Hurricane Harvey, we also picked specific points around the Gulf of Mexico to study the fluctuations in precipitation in these specific cities. So here you can see the 7 points we chose around the Gulf of Mexico. So Mary mentioned earlier that we found that the American Meteorological Society said that NASA's IMERG had a tendency to underestimate heavy rainfall and overestimate light rainfall. And so we decided to see if our data supported or refuted this hypothesis. So we chose points that had both heavy and light rainfall, so places that were heavily hit and minimally affected by the hurricane. And we also chose places all around the Gulf of Mexico, so we chose places in both Texas and in Louisiana. Instead of having to manually find the amount of precipitation for each city on each day, we used a QGIS plugin known as the point sampling tool to be able to see all this data at once. And if we were to have done a bigger project and done more cities, this would have saved a lot of time in the long run because we would be able to retrieve all of our data at once rather than having to do each city manually. So these graphs show the difference in daily precipitation measurements from NWS's AHAPS, shown in blue, to NASA's IMERG, shown in red. So in our first city, Rockport, we can see that the peak occurs on the same day, so the actual value is different. So because this is classified as heavy rainfall, we can see that IMERG is an underestimate, so the red curve is under the blue curve on that day. In our next city, Port Lavaca, we can see once again the peak is on the same day. And this is more medium rainfall, so there's honestly not that big of a difference between the AHAPS measurement and the IMERG measurement. So here the IMERG is a slight overestimate. In our next city, Houston, fun fact about this point is that it's actually my house. We can see that this is more heavier rainfall and that AHAPS is actually above IMERG, so IMERG is once again an underestimate, as supporting, this still supports the hypothesis. Then we see Galveston. This is an interesting point because there are 2 peaks. So if we look at the blue, the first peak is lower than the second. And so the first peak is a lighter rainfall, and so here we can see the red curve overestimates it, while in the second peak, this is heavier rainfall, so the red curve IMERG underestimates it. Then we have Lake Charles. This had relatively light rainfall compared with other places we saw, but you can see that as the rainfall gets heavier, the IMERG becomes more of an underestimate, and the difference between the blue curve and the red curve increases. Then we have Beaumont, one of the hardest hit places by Hurricane Harvey. This is on a very heavy rainfall day. You can see that the red is a huge underestimate. However, on this light rainfall day relative to the rest of today's Beaumont, you can see that the red curve overestimates it. And our last point, Lafayette, was chosen because they were minimally affected by the hurricane in terms of rainfall. And so throughout, you can see that there's not much rainfall, and so IMERG is an overestimate. However, towards the end, around the 29th, when rainfall starts to pick up, IMERG becomes an underestimate, supporting the hypothesis again.
So with this information, we've learned about how the data sets are different for precipitation between the 2 sources. We wanted to generate a map that would show these differences between the 2 data sets. So we generated these maps on QGIS using our calculator tool, where the IMERG data was converted to inches and it was subtracted from the AHAPS data to display the differences as a map. The goal of this converting was to see exactly where the differences in the data sets lie on the map, and to get the pixel by pixel comparison of these differences. So I selected 3 dates to generate these difference maps, and they were August 26th, August 27th, and August 30th. I selected these dates from the graphs Ellen just showed, and I analyzed them to notice the dates with the greatest amount of precipitation differences, and I then picked these dates and generate these maps. So if I were to just click through these 3 dates, this is the 26th, this is the 27th, and this is the 30th, I'm sorry. You can see that there's a significant difference between the data sets, especially in where Hurricane Harvey is around the eye and the outer bands of the storm. So it's pretty interesting to see that the greatest difference was in that storm area.
All right. So one issue that our group had when we started this project is that not all of our operating systems that we're using on our computers could easily convert what are called tar files into TIFF files. So most of the members in our group had Windows operating systems, whereas I had a Mac, and Mac operating systems can easily untar these files, but since everyone needed these files, we needed to figure out a way to easily get these 377 files untarred. So we used a Python script for this, and this script essentially used different modules to look for the specific tar files on our computers and loop through the different files and automatically untar them for us to give us our tips. And for a visual, this is about how many files we've had to deal with.
So some of the challenges we faced, as Kayla previously mentioned, we all had different computer systems, so it was hard for us to get them to collaborate sometimes, and sometimes they shut down, just a hassle, but thankfully we got through that. And then another thing was that the IMERG data was in millimeters and AHAPS was in inches, and so we had to go through IMERG and convert all of the data into inches so it be the same. And another thing was that our half-day offset, which is AHAPS's data was measured from noon to noon, whereas IMERG's data was measured from midnight to midnight, which could be, we compared the different frames to each other, and this could be a possible source of error.
So I guess with this, we just want to take this time to reflect on our amazing 2 weeks after this program. So I'll start. On a larger scale, it was definitely inspiring and amazing to hear about all the different career paths that are offered at NASA and Texas Space Grant and Center for Space Grant Research. And I guess on a more project-specific scale, I genuinely enjoyed making those maps on QGIS. So now I'm trying to look and explore careers where I can be doing this as a job, as I really enjoyed it.
Well, what I really took out of these 2 weeks is how important it is to have all different kinds of people in to create something greater than just one person. And I have realized that there are so many things and so many things that can, like we talked a lot about STEAM and STEM and how it takes a lot of different people to put something together.
What I took out of this program, especially project-based, is I was exposed to more STEM-related activities other than what they just provide at a regular school, and I thought that was truly amazing to work with legitimate NASA data. And even though Hurricane Harvey doesn't, or natural disasters like that directly affect me, since I live in California, it really sparks more curiosity of how systems like this can analyze issues that we have to deal with every year.
I really enjoyed the map making. I've always been into geography, so I'd seen plenty of these types of maps before, but actually having the ability to have hands-on experience and making it myself was really neat. And because of the software we use, QGIS is open source. I look forward to continuing to use it even after this program is over and to make more maps.
So we just had a couple of thank yous for definitely without any of these people and everyone here, we wouldn't have had the product we did and we wouldn't have come to the conclusions we did. So we want to thank Texas Space Grant Consortium, the Center for Space Grant Research, and NASA for this amazing 2 weeks. We want to thank Ms. Baggio, Ms. Crenshaw, our externs, Ms. Claudia, Ms. Gina, Ms. Leah, and all of the SEAS internship staff. And lastly, we want to thank our amazing, amazing mentor, Ms. Teresa Howard, for basically just being with us these whole 2 weeks, supporting us, guiding us, and just teaching us so much about what she does. Thank you. So any questions? Yes.
So on the slide when you compare the IMERG to the HAPS, to prove the hypothesis that IMERG underestimates light rainfall and overestimates the heavier rainfall, what makes you so sure that HAPS is correct? How do you know that IMERG is incorrect?
Well, in general, when people say that something is like more accurate, it's because they also have like flood gauges in the actual cities to measure data from the ground, and so it's compared what they measured from more like remote sensing to what was actually experienced in the city. Comes to the conclusion that one is more accurate than the other.
So do you have any ideas as to why it underestimates and overestimates the data?
Well, IMERG uses remote sensing, which is, it senses the data from space, and we think that
And also it's ground radars.
yeah, it helps us ground radar, so it's actually there to measure the precipitation and rainfall in person. I should say, and IMERG is from a great distance, so obviously there's room for errors. So we just didn't.
One more question, I had something to answer.
So the NWS data, that's the National Weather Service, so that's US specific, while NASA studies the entire world, so one is more specialized, so it makes sense that their data will be more accurate for that specific region.
So it was really interesting, your Lake Charles data, when you saw the difference between the two models, had, I think it was slide 41, had, was there one after it?
There was one.
Yeah, there were. Okay, I guess go
What do we want?
the last one, Lafayette, sorry, thank you. I noticed that you can see there that the models switch, but I don't actually see a big change in the amount of precipitation. So how are you classifying light versus heavy precipitation? Because with a rain gauge, you can't tell the difference between the drop sizes and the volume. So is that the difference? A few drops of heavy rain versus a lot of drops of light rain could have the same volume.
So we actually asked our mentor this question. He said that anything above like 5 or 10 inches per day classified as like heavy rainfall. But when it comes to this, how you mentioned that they were like approximately the same numbers or like slightly offset, that was kind of what Maren talked about in our half-day offset, how some of our differences in data can be attributed to the fact that they were measured, like the actual days are 12-hour differences. So in this particular case, we won't know unless we try to find data that is measured in the same time frame. So that's more just multiple possibilities for what data cause of that.
So please join me in thanking the
So yeah, definitely I get back my grocery stores. I told her what that
I know, I can't want to see this.
Oh, this is the ISS imaging.
Yeah. I get eyes. Stand way back. Taking information on Mars. Police there. Yeah, I'm sorry.
2 minutes. 2-minute warning.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I got it.
See, becomes more before. Oh my God. It's actually cool. They did something. Okay, well, that's a bit I want one. Who am I gonna? Start writing things. They don't want to quit. I know, that's actually like his favorite, but they did that. Wow. Who are they? Whoa, yeah. Whoa, yeah. We love you, Christy. Somebody was talking about they were I was like, I don't know.
I'm gonna get one of them.
So our next group is the Magic Planet.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Keegan Fong. I am a rising senior from Memphis, Tennessee.
My name is Sahana Bellator, and I'm a rising senior from Dallas, Texas.
My name is Christine Wei, and I'm a rising junior from Brea, California.
My name is Stephen Marino. I'm a rising senior from Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Candace Stowe. I'm a rising junior from Seattle, Washington.
And collectively, we make up the Magic Planet team. We'd like to thank our teacher extern, Derek Hammonds, and we wouldn't be here without the help of our NASA mentors, Annie Hollier and Liz Higgins. So today we're going to be introducing our project on astronaut photography in the ISS. I think Christine's going to start us off with a short little video.
So to start off, we'd like to show you guys a time lapse taken by the Expedition 53 ISS crew members.
Some technical difficulties. Please stand by.
It's a really cool video.
We promise.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Okay, so we're just gonna talk about it. Sorry about that. So the video is basic. Okay, so it's taken by Expedition 53 as its crew members, and it shows. It starts out with clouds covering over the Atlantic Ocean, and then it moves over to the Balearic and Mediterranean seas, and then it shows the beautiful Sahara Desert and towards East Africa, and finally it finishes off at Lake Turkana in Kenya. It was taken in December 6, 2017, and it was a passover from Spain to Kenya. And on the right, the quote is working, yay. But this is basically what all astronauts feel when they're up on ISS or up in space. We as a team, we learned from interviews of astronauts after they come back from their missions that all of them wish that they could share what they see up in space with everyone down here on Earth easily. And everyone should be able to see all the beautiful images up there. And so with our Magic Planet and the user interface that we created during our time here at SEAS, the Remote Sensing and Earth Science Unit now has more access for public outreach for everyone. So this takes me to talk about the purpose of our project and the interface that we created. Just a brief little intro about Magic Planet itself. It's basically a 3D spherically projected globe that can depict images of Earth, videos, or other planets. But most importantly, it's a fun, interactive, and hands-on way to teach and demonstrate to an audience of all ages. And we tied in all of these features of the Magic Planet with pictures from the ISS to create a user interface that portrays regions of the world through careful selection of astronaut photography. And we chose 6 regions, which is also displayed on this globe right here. It's North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Southeast Asia. And we were each responsible to kind of explore in depth and gather photos of various focal lengths, noting the geolocation and prominent features of each image. And after implementing all of these images into our user interface, we were able to connect it with the Magic Planet and also be able to create a tool that can be potentially used in ISS crew training procedures. So the crew can therefore be able to identify a lot of features in these images. And so when they're up on ISS, they can take a variety of pictures and be able to geolocate each one. And last but not least, another objective is to construct a user interface for public outreach and hands-on education of geography. That means that this interface isn't only for astronauts, but it's also for the general public. For example, schools, museums, and other public institutions can use our Magic Planet interface to kind of teach and demonstrate research material in the most compelling way possible, captivating attention and fostering interest and growth in earth science, geography, and space exploration.
Okay, so before creating an interface and selecting images to use for astronaut crew training or public outreach, we needed to understand a little bit more about astronaut photography, specifically those taken aboard the ISS. There are currently 6 astronauts living on the International Space Station, and they circle the globe about once every 90 minutes. So that means they see 16 sunrises and sunsets per day. Okay, so as you can see from the image in the top right, clouds cover many regions across the globe. So when the ISS is passing over those regions, it won't be able to take pictures of the regions below. You can also see a congregation of clouds towards the center of the map, and this in a region known as the Intertropical Convergence Zone, or the ITCZ. The ITCZ is a belt of low pressure where trade winds from the northern and southern hemispheres meet. So this causes a lot of clouds to come to this area, and you also won't be able to find satellite imagery of areas near the equator as well. In the image, in the bottom image, you can also see the flight path that the ISS takes when traveling around the globe, and you can also see some of its limitations. The ISS is bound by 51 degrees north and south of the equator, so that means that it can take pictures from anywhere from the tip of southern South America to northern United States, but only pictures taken within this region would be optimal. Okay, so there are a few features we need to focus on while analyzing astronaut photography or satellite images, and one of them was focal length. So as you might know, focal length is basically how zoomed in or zoomed out the camera is when taking an image. So the more zoomed out in images, the smaller the focal length is going to be, and the more zoomed in images, the larger the focal length is going to be. So does anyone recognize the picture that's behind me? No? What? Yeah. Okay, well specifically we see Texas. And so over here we see the Gulf of Mexico, and we'll see Bird's Foot Delta over here. And if the image was shifted a little more to the right, we'll be able to see more of that delta. And then over here we see the Red River, which is intersected by the Mississippi River. And this was taken at a focal length of about 60 millimeters, so this is pretty zoomed out. Hey, does anyone recognize this image? Closer. This is like central Texas, so Austin is definitely somewhere in there. I don't know where, but it's there. So we can see Lake Travis over here as well as the Colorado River. And this is taken at a focal length of about 180 millimeters. Okay, does anyone recognize this image? Yeah, okay, so this is Austin, and this is downtown Austin. You can see the concentration of buildings over there. And this arrow is actually pointing at the Kinsolving dormitory, where we've been staying for the past 2 weeks. And if you look slightly south of that, we can see the UT football stadium, which I think is pretty cool. And this is taken at a focal length of about 1,600 millimeters.
As I'm sure most of you could tell, those images were taken by astronauts either aboard the ISS or their respective shuttles. What you may not know is how we got those images. We got those images from a website called the Gateway to Astronaut Photography, or GAPE for short. GAPE is an astronaut photography database under NASA's domain, and it was actually created by one of our own mentors, Melissa Higgins. GAPE has millions of photos from all around the world. But like Sahana said, the ISS flies between the 51st parallel in the south and the 51st parallel in the north. So the majority of images will fall in that region. However, there are still images outside that region, but the further from the parallels you stray, the more oblique the camera angles become and resolution fades. And this is an important feature, this is important to consider because we want very high resolution photos because our interface, which is made with images from GAPE and the Magic Planet, could be used in future crew training in geography.
All right, so as Stephen mentioned, we created an interface for astronauts to do crew training, and I'll just put that up. So this is the interface we created over the past 2 weeks using HTML. Essentially, crew members will be using this website to do their crew training, and they will be looking at pictures of Earth from space that astronauts have taken aboard the ISS, and so that they can recognize pictures of Earth when they're actually aboard the ISS. So we're going to click here to start. And then we have a world map that's a little cut off because it's resolution, but we can see the 6 major regions: North America, South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, and Southeast Asia is cut off. So we click on a region to view, and we pull up a regional map. So here is North America. And we can see North America has been categorized into 5 subregions. And we also have a brief description on the right, covering some of the history and culture of the continent. So to view the photos, we click on region, let's say the Western US. And then here we have a table with some of the pictures we pulled from GAPE that represents the geography of the region. So the table includes information about each picture, such as photo ID, which helps us give information about which mission this photo is taken on, and then the focal lengths, as Sahana mentioned before, the geolocation of the center point of the image so astronauts know where this image was taken, and also some features of the image that we found to help astronauts create. And then if you go to the sidebar, we can also explore different regions of the world.
All right, so as Candace was showing, we created an interface in order to better catalog and display images, especially when it comes to potentially being used as ISS crew training. But what we also had is the namesake of our project, the Magic Planet. And so as you can see in front of me, I'm sure you guys have been all intrigued by this. This is the Magic Planet apparatus. And so it's a system, it's got a projector base with a mirror, and it shoots the projection into the interior of this acrylic dome, and you can display images, and we're using it specifically for our globe. But it's a really cool device to use, and here, let me get to the okay, well, we had a video. That's not going to work. So this, you're not actually limited by just showing our globe. You can show 3D movies and videos, and so it kind of actually gives you a virtual reality experience without actually having to put goggles on, because you can see like panoramas and display data sets and model weather patterns and all sorts of really cool things on this device. And so specifically for NASA, we're using this as a piece for public outreach, especially when it comes to like classrooms, museums, conferences. We can teach students, teachers, parents, whoever wants to learn about geography. They can get a good 3D visualization of the planet. And so I think it's a really cool tool to be used in order to reach out for the public when it comes to NASA's ISS imaging. So I think we're going to give a brief demonstration on it. So what we've done, we've taken the images that we've cataloged on our interface, and we've placed them on top of the layer of the globe on the Magic Planet. And so you can see we have the Teton Mountain National Park out in Wyoming. This is the Grand Canyon, see the Colorado River snaking through, and if you turn the globe a little bit over, you can actually see the locations of where these photos are coming from. And so, for instance, this is Kennedy Space Center, which I'm sure all of y'all are familiar with. And yeah, okay. So you can see this is actually a really cool photo. I really like this one. This is the Andes Mountains in Bolivia in South America. And you can kind of see the smoke and the water plume, and all of the geographic features on the image you can display on the Magic Planet. I think we're going to do a couple more. So this is also in the Andes. You can see the glaciers and the mountains and a couple of the lakes. And these are some of the images we've taken from the ISS database and displayed on this Magic Planet. All right. So the goal of our project was to create an interface in order to be used for crew training, and also for public outreach to extend what these astronauts are seeing from space to people like you guys. So we have a great quote from William Anders, one of the Apollo 8 astronauts. He goes, "We came all this way to explore the moon, and the most important thing is that we discovered the Earth." I think that really applies to this project, because when we don't really tend to think about the Earth as like a giant system, but when you actually see it from the bigger picture, it's quite a magical planet. And so it's really good to keep in mind what we're living on and how we see the Earth, and hopefully our project has helped all of you guys realize the how you can see through ISS astronaut photography. And so there's our citations. And going off of that, I think on a more personal note, I think this project has really helped me moving on in the future. I am still, quite frankly, not sure what I'm going to do for the rest of my life when it comes to career, but this whole experience has opened my horizons. It's been absolutely unforgettable. I'm going to remember all you guys, I'm sure. And yes, thank you.
This is definitely a great experience for me. I learned a lot of geography over the past 2 weeks, as well as some HTML. I'm really grateful that we got to go visit the Johnson Space Center and meet some amazing scientists and all of you guys. So this has definitely been an unforgettable experience.
So this is actually my first internship ever, and this has set the bar really high for other internships to come, which I'm super excited about. But one thing that I really enjoyed, and there are so many, but I just want to share one, was that I actually got to hear astronaut Clayton Anderson talk. And I've never heard an astronaut talk before, and it was just mind-blowing because as an aspiring astronaut, it was really nice to get to hear him talk about his life and his experiences. And he was just so funny and so lighthearted. And one point on his speech was that because I have no idea what I really want to do, but when he talked about the right bucket and the left bucket and how like whatever you like, put it in your right bucket, and then if it's not your forte, put it in your left bucket. And I felt like that really gave me a sense of direction, and it kind of assured me that it's okay to not know what I want to do. And so I'm just so appreciative of all of you guys, and also for Clayton Anderson for game. So that's my part.
Yeah, like Christine said, and I feel like I'm in the same boat as everyone by saying like these have been some of the best weeks of my life, and I've met some amazing people, great experiences, and I hope I stay in contact with a lot of you.
Alright, so like Christine, this is also my first internship, and I think I definitely learned a lot of new skills during this project. So for example, I came into this camp knowing absolutely no HTML, and we created that website, which is all done in HTML, which is pretty amazing. And then also the geography part, I definitely learned a lot of geography, and I think just looking at the photos that we showed and a couple of others, I just like all those amazing and beautiful photos that of places I might never get to see, but I can see them on the microphone.
So we'd like to give a huge thank you to Miss Melissa Higgins and Sandy Hollier for working with us and mentoring us these past 2 weeks. It really means a lot. We'd also like to thank Ms. Margaret Baggio for allowing for us to be a part of this program and making this internship so fun and educational. And we'd also like to thank all the other SEAS teachers and NASA for making this experience quite unforgettable. So thank you so much. And does anyone have any questions?
Questions for the Magic Planet cruise? So how did you go about identifying the places that you found on Earth in the astronaut photography? Did you already have a general idea where it was, or how did you identify the geographic features?
Yeah, so we had to find bodies of water and certain landmarks that would be easy for astronauts to see from like their vantage point on the ISS. So finding those key, like for example, the Pacific Ocean off the coast of California, or the Great Lakes, the Gulf of Mexico, specifically within North America. Those were like some key features that we tried to focus on when looking at different continents that would make those regions pretty recognizable for astronauts.
Following up on that question, did the photography that you get, when you get the astronaut photography, does it have a timestamp that you can then go back and look at where they were in orbit?
Sometimes the photos have timestamps, but if they're before the 2000, they usually don't. It usually just gives you a year and a month. But if it's a more recent photograph, then it will have a timestamp, and you can go back and compare it. And you're also given the coordinates of where the ISS was when it's taken, so you almost don't even need the timestamp.
So you talked about looking at pictures and having to tell how far away it was or how your game was. How did you go about determining?
Looking at the gate website that we showed earlier, so that was created by mentor Melissa Higgins, and that has a lot of information about the photograph, including all the stuff showed in the table, like the location, features, stuff like that.
Focal length is provided, and you can just tell based on if it's in like 180 or 400, if it's like a mid-range photo, if it's like 800 to 1600, that's very zoomed in comparatively. And then if it's below 180, it's going to be a lot zoomed out, and you probably see the rise a little bit.
Yeah, and on the Magic Planet itself, we tried to get pictures of various focal lengths. So there's going to be a lot of zoomed out pictures and a lot of zoomed in pictures. There's a variety.
How does your website talk to the Magic Planet?
So the Magic Planet was created by this company called Global Imagination, And it also created this software called Storyteller. And we used our HTML code to link the software to our code. So when we click on a picture, it'll tell the Magic Planet to pull up that picture on this interface. Any other questions?
Great. Join me in thanking the next.
Good luck, I know
We had a joke about last. That's what I oh, dang
Imagine studying it and take up your on the board.
So please join me in welcoming the Mars exploration team.
Hi, my name is Devani Soleil and I'm from New Jersey.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Witt and I'm from Spring, Texas.
I'm Noah Walters and I'm from Saline, Michigan.
Hi, I'm Naomi Oak and I'm from Bluebell, Pennsylvania.
Hi, I'm Nikki Wang and I'm from Columbia, South Carolina.
Hi, I'm Trevor Irwin. I'm from San Antonio, Texas.
Hello, my name is Katie Mulry and I'm from Dallas, Texas. For the past 2 weeks, our team has been working to develop and design a Mars habitat village. And our mission is called ROAM, the Research and Observation of Mars through Exploration. We believe that exploration of Mars will allow us to do novel scientific research and to test the human ability to survive and discover on another world. Our ROAM mission village will support up to 14 people for 500 days. Our nominal crew size is 7 astronauts, so in the event of an emergency, they can be supported for double the mission duration. This is the list of systems that we will be discussing throughout our presentation.
Let's go over the overview of our mission. Our main requirements are that every year for 5 years, we have a budget of $1 billion. We have to try to have minimal contamination on the Martian surface, and our Mars village needs to support about up to 14 people for 500 days. And the astronauts need to be able to repair systems like the life support system, the power system, and the rovers. So if you take a look at the right side of the slide, we have all our solutions there, and we have met these expectations. So before the astronauts even get to Mars, there will be something sent up previously, and that includes 4 10-kilowatt nuclear-powered modules, 2 rovers, and a communication satellite. Now, Evelyn will be discussing the concept of operations.
The concept of operations is our basic architecture of our launch schedule. So basically, launch 1 will have the NOx module, launch 2 will have the HEL module, and launch 3 will have the NOR module. Each launch will get extra supplies. We were looking at 3 different landing sites for our modules. We had Utopia Planitia, Utopia Rupes, and Gale Crater. This is our landing site decision matrix.
The distance from the equator and the terrain are on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, and they're added up to get a total, which is out of 20. Gale Crater is closest to the equator, making it one of the warmer spots that we were looking at, with an average temperature of 1 degree Celsius to negative 70 degrees Celsius. Utopia Planitia and Utopia Rufus are further from the equator, giving them an average temperature of negative 80 degrees Celsius. The terrain on Gale Crater is smoother with less obstacles, making it the ideal landing location for our modules. Utopia Planitia and Utopia Rufus have more rocky, dangerous terrain to try to land on. So Gale Crater won with an 18 out of 20. On the left, we have a 3D module of Gale Crater, which we printed out at the Maker Lab here at UT Austin. And on the right is a picture of Gale Crater from the Mars Curiosity rover. We chose Gale Crater for 3 more reasons. In June 2018, we recently discovered the building blocks of life from the Curiosity rover, which piqued our interest in Gale Crater scientifically. And we also know the terrain because the Curiosity rover has mapped it extensively, so there are no hidden obstacles for us on the surface of Mars. And also, the Curiosity rover landed in 2012, and it is still working and sending back images and data, which makes it a historical site. And now Katie will talk to you about our module design.
As you can see from the design on the slide and from our 3D models that we 3D printed, which you can view outside the room, our Mars Village has 3 dome modules. We used a rigid inflatable hybrid concept for our models, where most of the module is a rigid concept. It is made of 2 sheets of polymer complex, and between them is a pipeline system of water pipes. This provides radiation shielding. In the middle, as you can see on the picture on the left, there is an inflatable ribbon of material made from the same material as the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module, which is currently flying aboard the International Space Station. It is shielded from micrometeorites, so it will be able to withstand the challenges of the Martian surface. And now Dave and I will talk about the daily duties of the crew on Mars.
So the daily duties are in Earth hours, just to make things simpler and easier to read. And Mars's day is 37 minutes longer than Earth, so that's accounted for. And all the astronauts wake up at 5 a.m. and then they have the choice of taking care of personal hygiene, exercising, or just have free time until breakfast at 7. Then after that, you see some blocks are repeated, so I'm just going to go over what those blocks mean. So the meeting is when all the astronauts meet and they discuss things that the work they have done previously and what they plan to do on the day of. Then they have work blocks of 3 hours and time for just themselves and exercise for 2 hours. All the meals are accounted for, and then they get a good solid 8 hours of sleep. So our Mars Village is broken up into 3 modules, starting with the home module, which is for crew living, the NOR module, which is for repair and emergency materials, and the NOS module, which is for systems like power. And now Katie will start us off with the home module.
Like all the modules, the hum module is inflatable and rigid, so it ships in a compressed form to fit inside the payload fairing. Once it lands on Mars, it expands horizontally to provide more living space. In contrast to the other 2 modules, the hum module has a second floor, which will be used for crew living space. These are the other systems and rooms that we will be discussing in the hum module. The first of these is the food storage and preparation system. Our Mars mission will use the dehydrated and solid form food currently found on the International Space Station. However, we are assuming that this food will be able to have a shelf life of over 50 months and will be developed at this point. Currently, the food does not have a long enough shelf life to sustain the time that it will be spent on Mars, as it is pre-deployed to the surface before people get there. Once people get there, though, the kitchen has a water dispenser and food heater, which they can use to heat up their food. This is heritage technology from the International Space Station and is optimized for this type of food. In the kitchen, a large dining table allows the crew to eat together, a window allows them to look outside, and a TV provides for entertainment. Most of the food storage is in the storage room adjacent to the kitchen. There is storage space in the kitchen itself for small quantities of food. Because the mission duration of the Mars surface stay is over 500 days, it will be incredibly important for crew psychology that each person has their own room and private space. For this reason, the crew's quarters are housed on the 2nd floor of the hum module. Each room has its own folding desk, chair, and mattress,
And all furniture can be folded up against the wall to maximize floor space. There's storage in the rooms for the crew's clothing, and each member of the crew will have a certain mass allotment to bring personal items from Earth. And now Evelyn will discuss the gym. On the way to Mars, astronauts will lose bone and muscle loss due to the lack of body support from zero gravity. To combat this, we're bringing two devices, the Med2 and a treadmill. The Med2 is a miniature exercise device which combines the cycle and the restrictive exercise device found on the ISS. This will give our astronauts an aerobic and resistant exercise workout. The treadmill is self-explanatory. We will be using it to have the astronauts work on their leg muscles. And the astronauts will each use it for 1 hour, will use each machine for 1 hour a day, giving them a 2-hour workout period. This also comes with some psychological boosting. Working out is proven to help fight depression and anxiety and help relieve feelings such as tension, anger, and stress. The hospital is very important because we will bring in supplies such as rubbing alcohol to ventilators and laser scalpels for emergency care supplies. We will be bringing hard drives with a database full of everything you need to know relating from operations of machines to emergency situations. And we will also be bringing physicians on board, but we cannot rely on the human mind to remember everything in an emergency situation. So that is another reason why we bring hard drives. We will be assuming that the Cressalon gel will be completed and ready to go by the time we launch. Cressalon gel is something you put on an open wound with shots bleeding within seconds. And this is vital for any emergency situation that happens. And now Devani will be talking to you about waste management.
So waste management is dependent on the contents of the wastewater. We have a waste storage unit outside of our 3 modules. And this stores feces and garbage. So the toilets, they have 2 buttons. One button is for feces and another button is for urine. So the shower water, the sink water, and urine all go to the water reclamation facility in module 3. Where the feces and the garbage stay in the storage unit. So to reduce the feces produced by all the astronauts for the 500 days, they will take the products from their decomposed waste and use it to fuel the growth of a bacteria. This bacteria is called Methylococcus capsulatus, and it's actually being used as a primary ingredient in the food, which is shown above. This food is fed to animals, so one of our assumptions is that this food would be approved for human consumption by the time of our launch. The food is called feed kind. This process is also very beneficial for us because it produces a backup food source, and it also produces methane, which can be used for plastic filaments, which Noah will talk about later. As for entertainment, everything you see above will be with the astronauts on Mars, and this is beneficial for them psychologically. To maintain crew morale, you have to minimize boredom, and that's what the entertainment serves for. So Noah will be taking us through the normal.
Moving away from daily activities of the crew and the crew living space, we move on to the Norm module, which is named after Norm, who gave us our tour at JSC. He always wanted to be on Mars, and through this module, he will be. The requirements of the Norm module include rover parking and storage, as well as maintenance of the modules overall and the rovers. Also includes spacesuit storage and maintenance, as well as backup systems, and just rather upkeep of the entire modules as a whole. While rovers are provided for us on the Martian surface when the astronauts do arrive, we do need to pick which type of rovers are being used. For this, we chose the SEV, which stands for Space Exploration Vehicle. We chose the SEV because it has a range of 200 kilometers, which allows for extensive research of Gale Crater and the area surrounding it, and allows us to do much more science and exploration than the Curiosity rover ever could. The SEV can support 2 people or 4 in the case of emergencies, such as a breach in one of the modules, and doubles as a storm shelter with radiation protection. It's also pressurized on the inside and has an air dock hatch, so it does not need to be kept inside of the module itself and can be docked, and there's no need for a pressurization, depressurization process from going in and out of the rover. In terms of tools that will be used to repair the modules as well as the rovers themselves, there are a lot of common supplies that will be brought, such as flashlights, multimeters, and duct tape. However, if we were to list all of these tools, then we would be here all day. Therefore, to mitigate some of these supplies, we will be bringing 3D printers. And you might ask yourself, how are you going to get the stuff to print the tools out for the 3D printers? There's this cool process outlined in the Mars Homestead project that details how to make plastic filament out of Mars regolith that we can find outside of the HABs themselves. It uses methane and converts that eventually to plastic filament. There is also a process that you can use to create concrete for bigger objects by using liquid sulfur as a binding agent. However, we'll also need metal to be able to print. It is outside of the scope of this mission to retrieve metal from the Martian surface, such as iron, so we will have to bring the metal in a powder form that can be printed. In terms of backup storage and systems that is in the normal module, there's a water tank, food storage, and oxygen tank. In terms of backup systems, we have a trace contaminant control monitor and assembly, pressure tanks, and the MOXIE systems, which will be detailed more in the NOACS module upcoming, where the primary systems are located.
We will be taking 2 spacesuits to Mars. The first is the Extravehicular Mobility Unit, also known as the EMU. This spacesuit has many systems, including a primary life support system, communication systems, protection against the from outer space, and a laboratorial system. This suit creates the pressure necessary for life by pumping in air until the suit reaches 1/3 of an atmosphere. We will be taking 8 of these suits because they will be used primarily in space. We will also be taking the Z2 spacesuit. This suit is an improvement of the EMU. It can be used on the Martian surface also in space. Its other improvements include a bubble helmet and taking carbon dioxide out of the suit without using lithium hydroxide. This suit has 3 main parts: the hard upper torso, the brief, and the back entry that makes it more of a spacecraft than an actual suit. We'll be taking 16 of these suits. As far as spacesuit maintenance, we have enough to repair communication systems, life support systems, and we've also provided extra EVA gloves and boots and tethers. For habitat upkeep, our crew will need to clean their clothes and also clean the habitat. For their clothes, we've provided the Zono sanitizing cabinet, and this cabinet uses ozone coupled with water to clean their clothes. They will also have an Ecolab disinfectant, which is a concentrated disinfectant that they can use for everyday cleaning. They'll also have vacuums. They'll have a handheld vacuum, much like the Black & Decker Dust Buster, that can be used to clean dust from equipment. They will also have a customized Roomba to help clean around the hub.
Now we move to the NOACS module, named after our second mentor. This is the systems module in charge of such systems like life support, waste management, fuel production, power distribution, and communications. The first system, the environmental control and life support system, or ECLES, is in charge of many things. We will be focusing on 2, water production and atmospheric control. E-class. Water is obviously a very important part of any Mars exploration since it's essential for life. So the primary goal of E-class is to provide a way for water production and management. The Viking mission in the 1970s revealed that the Martian regolith contains an average of at least 4% water by mass. So we can extract that water. That is a very safe way to get our water supply from, since regolith is everywhere. We will be providing a small amount of water for launch to the Martian surface for the water radiation protection. That will be discussed later, but beyond that, everything else will be used on waters. We'll be using a movable greenhouse-like structure that will evaporate the water from the regolith by using solar panels and reflectors. This can produce over 300 liters of water per inning day, which is more than 12 times the amount needed to support a crew of 7 each day. This also allows for ample water storage, which is needed since we can rely on solar panels. So during times without the sun, like during dust storms, we will bring out water. But the water storage tanks will allow us to store enough water that should such storms happen, we'll have enough water to last at least 23 days, and that is per system. We'll also be using the water recovery systems and filtration systems on the ISS for a Mars mission, since those are proven to work. Next up is atmospheric control, and we'll be focusing on 3 aspects: oxygen generation, carbon dioxide removal, and pressure control. For oxygen generation, we'll be using the MOXIE instrument. Mars Oxygen is the true resource utilization experiments. This process produces oxygen from the carbon dioxide already abundant in the Martian atmosphere. However, this is a instrument that's in development, and a one-person scale model is in testing and will be launched on the Mars 2020 lunar mission. So it is an assumption of ours that a full-scale model will be ready by the time of our launch. For carbon dioxide removal, we'll be using the carbon dioxide removal assembly as used on the International Space Station, and for pressure control, we'll be using pressure tanks as utilized on the ISS. Ivane earlier talked about human waste disposal, and I'll be talking about other forms of waste. Our mission must minimize contamination of the Martian surface, so we must get rid of our trash somehow. Unfortunately, there hasn't been any breakthroughs in waste management since the 60s. For example, even now, the ISS trash is still dealt with by sending it back to a free cargo ship and then just let it burn in the atmosphere. So we will be trying to use as much recyclable and biodegradable materials as possible, from clothing to packaging and more. For some stuff that's still not biodegradable, like some forms of plastic, we'll be using a thermal degradation reactor, which will burn these materials and turn it into ash, carbon dioxide, and methane. The ash can be used as fertilizer. The carbon dioxide can then feed into our production system that we'll discuss later, and the methane can be used in Module 2 as discussed by Noah to make plastic filaments for our printers. However, not all things are burnable, such as batteries and nuclear waste, and these will have to be stored and transported back to Earth in disposal containers. Luckily, these systems are already in place on the ISS, and transportation system that we'll be using will be heavily based on the existing technology. And next up is fuel production. We can get to Mars, but we also need to get back. Fuel takes up most mass on any launch. In fact, for a Falcon Heavy launch rocket, fuel is 15 times more massive than the structure of the rocket. So we must be able to produce fuel on the surface because we will simply not be able to launch that much mass to Mars. We will be using the Project Morpheus, which is a lander to carry us off the Martian surface, and its fuel is composed of methane and oxygen as an oxidizer. So we must have a way of producing methane and oxygen, and that can be accomplished through the Sabatier electrolysis process. The Sabatier process uses carbon dioxide and combines with hydrogen gas to produce carbon dioxide and water and methane. The methane can be used for fuel, and the water can then be electrolyzed to form hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen as the oxidizer, and the hydrogen is recycled back to the Sabatier process. And now Trevor will talk about power distribution.
All right, so on our Mars base, our primary power will come from kilowatt reactors, which are specialized reactors that can produce up to 10 kilowatts of energy. Now, the main reactors we're looking at are called Prestige reactors, which stands for kilopower reactor using Stirling technology. These reactors are still being developed, but they are assumed to be done by the time the first Mars mission will land. Next is radiation shielding. So in total, we have 3 layers of radiation shielding around our habitat. The first is an outer wall of a polymer complex. This will provide some radiation shielding for the astronauts inside. The main radiation shielding, however, comes from the water shield that we have next to install. This is consisting of flexible piping that encircles the entire hab and all the airlocks. This allows for 5 centimeters of water shielding throughout every part of the hab. After that, we have another inner wall of the polymer complex, giving us a grand total of 3 layers of radiation protection. Next is lab storage. So as you know, labs require sample preparation. Generally, this is in like a fridge or something. However, we don't want to spend any excess energy on cooling costs, so we're simply going to install a module or an attachment outside of module 3. This attachment will simply use the Martian atmosphere to cool it, so we don't have to spend any excess energy on cooling the attachment, and it will function as a mini airlock, allowing an astronaut from the outside to put in a sample, and then a scientist on the inside to then open up that attachment and then take the sample without having to ever step outside. Finally, communication systems. So a relay orbiter must be put in orbit prior to a manned mission. Right now, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, or MRO, is the best relaying orbiter that we have, and it can only relay an average of about 6 megabytes a second. To give you a comparison, the International Space Station has a bandwidth of about 300 megabytes a second. So obviously a new orbiter must be put in place. Now, this orbiter would have about the same cost as MRO, as MRO had scientific instruments on it as well. It wasn't just a pure relay orbiter, whereas this satellite probably would be. However, the cost of this orbiter is beyond the scope of this project, so it was not included inside of our final cost sheet. And these are the totals based on each module. As you can see, we have totals in mass and in cost. Our cost just hit over $500 million, and our mass just was over 100,000 kilograms. And here are our references.
Right. The Mars Exploration team would like to thank our mentors, Dr. Humboldt Mandel and Mr. Adam Notes, as well as Mrs. Margaret Baggio, the NASA C staff, and the teacher externs. Thank you also to the UT Maker Lab for allowing us to use the 3D printers, which we have those models out in the hallway that you can see later, and to CSR for allowing us to use their facilities. Our team has thoroughly enjoyed the challenge of designing and modeling our Mars mission. It involved lots of hard work and late nights, but we all learned and grew from the challenge of working with a motivated team to accomplish a goal that we were all passionate about. Thank you again to the NASA SEAS program for providing us with this opportunity to learn and to explore. Are there any questions?
I have one question about, you were talking about ECLSS, and you talked about shutting it down when you had the solar panels weren't using the sun. You got the nuclear, got your nuclear power sources. Why didn't you use those?
So first off, when the solar panels aren't working, we'll only be shutting down the water production part of A+. And it's only the primary system of A+ production because we're using greenhouses, which is much more economical and weighs much less than a thermal reactor would. As a backup system, I think we have considered having like a small radial just reactor that will produce a small amount of water. But because the greenhouse system can produce so much water per day that will not be used every day, we're able to keep up with the ample storage that if it does storm more to cause a blackout for say 30 days, we'll still have more than enough water to get through this month.
Also, the nuclear reactors are to power most of the modules. The solar panels are just primarily for the greenhouses, so those are not used on the modules themselves.
One other question. This is, you didn't tell anybody who the HUM module was named after.
Right, of course, sorry. The HUM module is named after our mentor, Dr. Humboldt Mandel. Are there any other questions? Trevor?
Can you explain the difference between the extravehicular spacesuit and the other spacesuit?
So the EMU, which I think is what you're describing, was the original spacesuit from the 60s. It's older, it's harder to move, but the Z2 spacesuit allows for more movement, and it also doesn't use lithium hydroxide to take out carbon dioxide, which means that we're using less systems. And it also has this thing called a back entry hatch, which basically makes it like a spacecraft, so you can walk inside from our hab without having to like suit up and have someone else help you put on your suit.
So why do you need the other ones?
We will have to have some suits just like spares. So the EMU is going to be used for emergencies, and it can also be used if we do have something orbiting or we have like a mini space station, and we can store it up there just in case we have to do a space.
Y'all mentioned biodegradable. Doesn't that mean you're gonna have to pick up bacteria to do that too, since there won't be any bacteria on Mars? For the waste disposal?
Wait, are you talking, so you're talking about the bacteria, are you talking about the feces that we're using the bacteria?
Well, that was, because you also mentioned biodegradable just for other waste. So you're gonna use biodegradable.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're gonna have like a small greenhouse system and the biodegradable waste can be used to, yeah, we will have to bring bacteria, but I think even for Naomi's, not Naomi, sorry, Devani's human feces management plan, we're gonna have to bring the bacteria anyways. And to make a sustainable Martian base, we will need bacteria to introduce it to the soil, for example, so that we can grow plants and the likes. Yes.
Why didn't you grow potatoes?
So we were told in our mission constraints to plan for mostly bringing your own food. Nobody has currently tested growing food on Mars, so we do not want to rely on that as our main food source. Also, the Martian soil, you can farm in it, but it does require some preparation beforehand. You do need to wash out the perchlorates from the soil, and there's certain fertilizers that NASA is developing that are slow release fertilizers that add in more the correct ratios of the compounds needed to grow plants.
So if Mark Watney, okay. One other reason this may not have worked, even though Mark Watney's soil mixture of feces and Martian soil, it just doesn't have the complex like food webs of microbes that we have here on Earth. So even that plan might not have worked.
Good for the movie.
So for the groups who have already completed their presentation, if you would come to the front, we want to get a photograph with you and your project mentors before we break for lunch. And we will be going into lunch shortly. They're setting everything up. And we'll have lunch from 12 to 1, and we'll start presentations back in this room at 1 o'clock.